Trade rumors and reports are continuing to escalate league-wide as the trade deadline looms just a couple days away, and we get a brand new Riley Smith update, which is pretty shocking. We're going to break down in this video, as well as the Rangers look like they're still going to make a few moves, including trading their longest tenured player. We're going to break it all down in this episode of Rangers Digest, but before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 68% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel, so if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening with the New York Rangers, from trade rumors and trade reports heading into the deadline this Friday, as well as practice updates, game reactions, all that fun stuff, it's free. Be sure to hit that subscribe button down below, but let's get right into it. Waking up this morning as a New York Rangers fan, you're feeling pretty good because they got some help league-wide, and the Rangers today are officially in a playoff spot. They're in the last wildcard spot there with 66 points. They have the tiebreaker over the Detroit Red Wings, and the reason this is a big deal is because you play Columbus twice coming up here this month, so you have an opportunity to not only solidify yourself in a playoff spot. You have 66 points, the New Jersey Devils have 72, and they're in free fall mode. They're dealing with a ton of injuries. They're not winning games. You have a real opportunity here. I know Columbus is ahead of them at this point in time, but if you're able to beat Columbus, you have a real opportunity here to find yourself somehow, after everything that's happened this season, in a divisional playoff spot where you could end up playing the Carolina Hurricanes, which the Rangers have had the Hurricanes numbered the last couple of years. So should be very interesting to see how this season ends, but looks like the Rangers could make the playoffs. Wasn't looking likely a couple days ago. They have to win some big games. Now, if you told me last year that if the playoffs started today, the Rangers would play the Washington Capitals, I would say sounds fantastic. And it was fantastic. They swept the Washington Capitals. But if the playoffs started today, the Rangers would once again play the Washington Capitals, but things are very different. The Capitals leading the Eastern Conference with 86 points so far this season. And ironically enough, the Rangers play their next game tonight against the Washington Capitals, which is a big test. How do you play against a really good team? You're coming off the two back-to-back shutouts, great games. How do you play against the Washington Capitals? But should be very interesting heading forward. But let's get into some trade talk. It looks like from Vince Mercogliano, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of it, Chris Kreider could also be on his way out of New York. And we're going to get to a Riley Smith update as well in just a little bit, which I think is very interesting because he is as good as gone. I can't remember quite a situation like this where, you know, it's so obvious, but we will get to that. But we're less than 72 hours away from the NHL trade deadline with rumors swirling around like crazy. I tried to decipher what's real and what's not while unfolding my notebook with everything I've gathered regarding the New York Rangers plans. Hurry up and read. So we're going to do exactly that. And this is from the article. And he said, Vince Mercogliano said, that is, my sense is that the New York Rangers are heading towards an eventual split with their longest tenured player, Chris Kreider. Two people with knowledge of the situation told Vince and obviously Lohud.com, part of the USA Today network, that New York remains motivated to move him. One league source believes a trade is still possible this week, but others point to a summer transaction as the more likely scenario. So very interesting stuff here where it's very much still up in the air that Chris Kreider could actually get traded in 2 days. Now, keep in mind, he is very much injured. I don't think that they're keeping him out. His situation and Riley Smith's situation are very different. Riley Smith is as good as gone. That's why they're holding him out, so he doesn't sustain an injury, so they can acquire something for him. Chris Kreider, I actually believe, is hurt. He's been dealing with an injury all season long, so, you know, I actually do believe that he is hurt. He is not being held out for trade-related reasons, and I feel like that's going to affect his trade value. Who wants to acquire an injured Chris Kreider? And when you take a look at his stats so far this season, 21 points in 48 games, 17 goals. He is a shell of himself this season. We know he can play better. And I mean, 33 is not that old. I mean, like, we see a lot of 33, 34-year-olds going off this season in the league. This player is definitely injured. So, you know, obviously he's more of a goal guy than an assist guy throughout his entire career. But I mean, he's just not playing up to the standard that we know Chris Kreider can. I mean, it's been a steep drop off too. He had a pretty good season last year. So, you know, being held out right now, obviously, I believe due to injury and something that he's been nursing, I think, all season at this point. So it's looking like they could still move him. I think it's unlikely at this point because, again, what team wants an injured Chris Kreider? Although a lot of teams would, especially if the Rangers can retain salary, which they can. They absolutely can. So I think it's going to be interesting. And one last thing before we move on, too. I think that the Rangers want to free up as many roster spots as possible. I don't know if they actually want to do it, or I don't know if Peter Laviolette's going to have that much interest in doing it, but it's going to happen anyway because that's the way that it should be for the rest of this year. You should free up as many roster spaces as possible to bring up young guys from Hartford, like we've seen with Brett Berard, Brennan Othman, guys like that. Give them the experience. See if you make the playoffs. And it's crazy what happens when you trade away a couple guys whose bodies are breaking down and they're dealing with injuries. You inject some youth into the lineup, you start to win some games. It's crazy what can happen when you have some hungry players there on the third and fourth line. Now, what is left to do for the New York Rangers? This is from Vince as well. The only imminent trade prior to Friday's deadline will involve Riley Smith. We know that. Riley Smith will be traded before Friday. He's done as a New York Ranger. He's not practicing. He wasn't even taking the skate this morning. He's not practicing. He's not playing. Nothing like that. There were rumors about Toronto, but obviously we heard from Elliot Friedman that Riley Smith has a modified no-trade list, and it seems like all the Canadian teams and Buffalo is on that list. We're just speculating that, but it does seem like that is the case. Now, the Rangers sent a 2027 second-round pick and a 2025 conditional fifth to Pittsburgh to acquire Smith last summer, but it's hard to see them matching that return at this age. Now, keep in mind, last summer, we all thought that the Rangers were going to run it back with the same core group, that they added this player that they could add to the top line at a retained price, right? They had Pittsburgh retain salary. It seemed like a great move at the time. Hasn't worked out in that way, so they're going to get something back from him. Probably won't match what they gave up from, but hindsight is 2020 at the end of the day, at least in that case. And they're also big game hunting, and I think that Drury is setting them up for something huge in the offseason. And Fox, JT Miller, Igor Shesterkin gave the Rangers a core they believe they can build around, while Cooley, Alexi Lafreniere, Braden Schneider, and the next wave of prospects. Now, Lafreniere, I wouldn't put him in the same category as those other two because he hasn't had a great season. The other two have had good seasons, are penciled in for important supporting roles. But to truly catapult back into the NHL's upper echelon, there's an understanding that another leading man or two must be added. Now, I think that comes this summer, and I think that comes by way of Mikko Rantanen. So we will keep tabs on that. I know a lot of people are going to roll their eyes, but I think that Chris Drury is absolutely setting them up for a huge splash this summer, and he's going to sell as much as he can at the deadline, let the young guys play. If they make the playoffs, fantastic. They get that experience in the playoffs in the first round. If not, at least you tried. You're in the mix there, and you get some sort of compensation in terms of a draft pick that isn't, 27th overall. So that should be, something to look forward to, at least like the development of these players and what happens next year where you can retool in the offseason and go for it again, which is extremely exciting, I think. But in terms of Chris Kreider and Riley Smith, Kreider's cap hit is $6.5 million, obviously a lot less now because we're almost done the season. So any team that's taking him on, it could come with some retained salary. I wouldn't if I was the Rangers because he still has 2 years left on his deal after this one. He's in year 5 of 7 of his contract, so I wouldn't retain any salary, but at least for this season, a team can take it on and then obviously figure out in the offseason if they want a contender, that is. So I don't know how many contenders can take that on, so maybe there is retained salary, but that would really handcuff you for a little while. So wouldn't want to do that, would not want to do that. JT Miller is a different, obviously, beast in that way, obviously not retaining any salary. The Vancouver Canucks in that trade either, but obviously JT Miller brings so much to the table. And then Riley Smith is a UFA, so he is very attractive for a lot of teams. Obviously his cap hit $5 million, but a lot less now because the season has progressed. So they'd be taking on a lot less, and I would be okay if Chris Drury retained some salary on this player because that could make some sense because he's expiring this summer anyway. So it's going to be very interesting. It looks like Chris Kreider is definitely very much still in the mix to be traded in the next couple days, although I think it's unlikely. He is still injured, but Riley Smith's time as a New York Ranger has definitely come to an end. So let me know in the comments what you think of trading Chris Kreider. It's going to be tough. It is going to be tough if that day eventually does come to see Chris Kreider with another jersey on, especially for fans, but looks like it could be coming sooner than any of us really imagined at this point. And obviously, let me know what you think about Riley Smith. What do you think the Rangers could get for Riley Smith? And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.